The Future History of Energy and Transportation. Documenting the paradigm shift from the era of oil and internal combustion to the era of robotics. By Julian Cox. Narrated by the author with the aid of an artificial intelligence. Chapter 22. A possible solution to hydrogen-related emissions. Concerning a sensible and affordable hydrogen policy for any government that wishes to act decisively and in good faith to its citizens, with respect to global emissions. Authors note, throughout this work there has hitherto been no favorable reference to government intervention. Likewise, the solution suggested here rests significantly upon a cessation of counterproductive expenditure of taxpayers' money as well as recovering some value from past expenditure. As discussed, at 16.58 kg CO2e per kilogram, figure courtesy of prominent hydrogen industry lobbyist Dr. C.E. Sandy Thomas, SMR production of hydrogen is by far the most GHG-intensive fossil fuel refinery process known to man, ensuring hydrogen is the very last substance a cogent environmental policy would seek to expand upon rather than seek to eliminate. Additionally, pursuit of methane hydrate feedstock for this process represents by far the greatest risk of replicating the effects of a well-aimed meteor strike on our planet, should the aim be to trigger a general extinction event. On its current trajectory, hydrogen is a critical part of the problem, not part of the solution to global emissions, and government investment in hydrogen is part of that problem. For the avoidance of reiteration, clean renewable hydrogen, otherwise known as recharging an exhaust product, water, is economic bunk that is categorically disallowed by physics. It is as equally unserious a proposition as the notion of an industry group of industrial flour mills, claiming to be interested in turning bread into flour to feed the world. Hydrogen is what happens when the world's most egregious global polluters come together to tackle climate change as an existential threat to public and investor relations. This is a quote from the self-styled Hydrogen Council, a global lobbyist group comprising a rogues gallery of polluting industry, plus principally European and Japanese bankers, advised by the same malfeasant management consultancy, McKinsey & Company, that was instrumental in orchestrating the outsourcing of U.S. strategic industry to China, making China the epicenter of global emissions, contrary to the U.S. national interest and humanity writ large. Brussels, July 15, 2021. With accelerated climate ambitions, momentum in hydrogen deployment has been boosted as a key energy transition pillar, according to the latest Hydrogen Insights updates from the Hydrogen Council in collaboration with McKinsey & Company. Globally, 131 large-scale projects have been announced since February 2021, taking the total to 359 projects. The total investment into projects and along the whole value chain amounts to an estimated $500 billion through 2030. For obvious reasons, hydrogen is generally perceived as an obviously silly thing. On the contrary, $500 billion aimed at subverting, undermining and derailing cogent government policy on energy and the environment the world over, is an assault on humanity, to be taken very seriously indeed. The companies in the Hydrogen Council are currently Honda, Toyota, Daimler, BMW Group, Hyundai Motor, Kawasaki, Air Liquide, Royal Dutch Shell, Total, Alstom, Engie, the Lind Group, and Anglo-American. The Council says it invites governments and key society stakeholders to put up the cash for hydrogen infrastructure to exploit. There are many more since the above list was compiled, including Microsoft, Indian Oil, BP, Chevron, GM, Johnson Matthey, 3M, Airbus, Saudi Aramco, Bosch, Great Wall, SoCalGas, Tokyo Gas, Sinopec and so on. See hydrogencouncil.com. A three-step solution to reverse the proliferation of hydrogen-related emissions. 1. Phase out and ban the practice of SMR, steam methane reforming, for hydrocracking gasoline, diesel and aircraft fuels and for other industrial uses by mandating that renewable generated hydrogen takes its place, or at the very least by the process of thermocatalytic decomposition of methane to hydrogen, and solid carbon particles, where the latter can double as a valuable source of synthetic graphite demanded in battery manufacturing for grid storage and for vehicles, replacing wasteful mass dumping of gaseous CO2. 2. A total cessation of taxpayer funding for hydrogen fuel cell activities to assist in halting the proliferation of hydrogen, the key driver for the global emissions malpractice of SMR. 3. A total cessation of taxpayer funding for hydrogen fueling infrastructure. Again, to halt the proliferation of hydrogen production. Almost all hydrogen filling apparatus paid for by the state of California, U.S. federal, European and Japanese taxpayer and elsewhere in the name of emissions reduction is distributed SMR located at taxpayer-funded fueling stations. To quote the Ford Motor Company Incorporated following participation in the 2012 NRL long-term FCV test. Currently, the most state-of-the-art procedure is a distributed natural gas steam reforming process. However, when FCVs are run on hydrogen reformed from natural gas using this process, they do not provide significant environmental benefits on a well-to-wheels basis, due to GHG emissions from the natural gas reformation process. Other sensible initiatives would be to call for a global moratorium on methane hydrate exploration and exploitation, as well as to bring high-profile consumer protection actions, via the FTC and so on, against high-profile advertisers and media outlets claiming hydrogen is zero emissions or green, only emission is water and similar gross acts of public deception. Also for governments to take action to recover public funds wherever these have been obtained under false pretenses related to GHG reductions. Tackling the problem of hydrogen in the legacy transportation fleet. Next to enforcing a ban on rainforest destruction, dealing with the problem of hydrogen is the simplest, cheapest and fastest possible solution for the largest possible positive impact upon global GHG emissions available. Due to its immense carbon intensity, terminating a relatively minor instance of industrial malpractice, the SMR production of hydrogen will remove the emissions equivalent of 200 million cars and trucks from the world's roads without impacting anybody's lifestyle one bit. Same fuel from the pump, same cars and trucks, 829 million metric tons less CO2 pumped into the air each year. A 3% global decrease in human emissions overall, amounting to a 10% reduction in proportion to total global vehicle emissions. All of this in return for laying on a mere 50 million metric tons of SMR-free hydrogen production to replace SMR like for like. To put this in perspective, 4,200 million metric tons of crude oil were extracted globally in 2013. It is entirely feasible to reduce global emissions by the equivalent 10% of all vehicle emissions in a single year in this manner, and those taxpayers' dollars and brilliant minds that have been put to work on renewable hydrogen production will have accomplished something useful, instead of participating blindly or deliberately in providing cover for a vast environmental and scientific fraud. Who else can help eliminate the problem of hydrogen? Additional prominent uses of hydrogen are in the production of agricultural fertilizer and semiconductor manufacturing. Apple, Samsung and Foxconn, for example, could do well to draw attention to this issue by ridding semiconductor supply chains of SMR dependency. This would be a most valuable and inexpensive act of corporate responsibility in return for a marginal increase in the cost of a minor contributor to chip manufacturing costs. In summary, hydrogen is the second greatest but most insidious threat humanity faces besides the economic and political instability of the petrodollar, whose debt-funded military standoff is held together by the nuclear option. Japan will be much better off under all circumstances seeking energy independence through renewables and sustainable transportation in the ordinary way, and hydrogen is not worth the risk to Japan, South Korea, China and elsewhere at any price. Long term, hydrogen as a fuel cannot compete with passive renewable generation and passive grid storage combined, even if methane hydrates poured on shore for free with no environmental risk and no engineering difficulty at all. The economics of compressing and handling hydrogen alone is uncompetitive when compared with the simplicity of transmitting electrical power along passive power lines. As discussed at length, the pursuit of fuel cell vehicles is hopeless, and investment in hydrogen fueling infrastructure is predestined to be stranded without any prospect of a return for the taxpayer in the US, Japan or elsewhere where cogent energy and environmental policies have thus far been undermined by fuel cell lobbyists. Even in the unlikely event that methane hydrate extraction could be perfected without mishap and hydrogen infrastructure addressed, too, it will be facing obsolescence regardless, in fair measure thanks to the prowess of Panasonic of Japan in the development of battery cell manufacturing technology. Thus the attempt to disturb methane hydrates is all immediate risk without any realistic prospect of either any medium nor long-term reward. Just a terrible act of desperation that cannot be sold honestly to the public, nor to policymakers. Hydrogen from any source including methane hydrates cannot compete at scale with renewable electrification, due to vehicle-level efficiency, infrastructure-level efficiency, materials-level efficiency, labor-level efficiency and service and systems-level efficiency. See chapter, A Hierarchy of Efficiency. As alluded to at the opening of this topic, there is a possible economic case for methane hydrates in societal-level energy efficiency. This is because the energy content of fire ice from under the ocean is sufficient to drive the balance of its processes from extraction and SMR furnaces to compression and distribution. This is why very smart folk that pursue hydrogen are cynical, but not simpletons. Yet despite this, in energy and transportation, societal-level energy efficiency alone is insufficient to compete with ambient energy capture and storage that is on trend to attain close to zero marginal cost of infrastructure and in the long run closing in on 100% societal-level energy efficiency and close to 100% materials and labor efficiency, too, as we enter a robotics economy to the exclusion of a hydrogen economy. In the case of robotics, Japan has considerable prowess as well. The networked autonomous EV, the smart grid and autonomous robotics of all kinds ensures hydrogen anywhere in the loop, is just an unnecessary cost item. Ambient energy capture, storage, distribution, intelligent energy dispatch and load balancing and robotic mechanization does not rely upon gross public deception when it comes to the environment. Hydrogen does. Authors note, I am forever hopeful that every word on the subject of hydrogen is the last word. Now on to something far more pleasant and encouraging.